Your body's not the problem. The garment is, and you know how to make clothes, which also means that you know how to make them fit your body or whoever's body you're putting them on just the right way.
I'm Nora, and this is also known as Nora Knits.
Hello there, I'm Nora, and you're watching, also known as Nora Knits. Thank you so much for joining me for another podcast episode today. I have some projects we really need to wrap up. I have a new cast on you guys haven't seen yet, and honestly, I'm more looking towards the future, so I'd love to have a little bit more advice on what you guys think I should cast on next. Before we get into all of that, if you haven't seen it already, last weekend I did post my fall knitting plans video. So if you haven't seen it, I would love it so much if you'd go check it out. And if you did see it, then you already know that I will be doing a giveaway. The winners will be announced next Saturday, September 20th. So be sure to get your comments in before then, but there are going to be 3 separate winners. One will be selected from last week's video in the comment section there. One will be all-time YouTube comments, and then one will be all-time Instagram tags, all using hashtag 2025 from the vault, which is the year-long knit along I have been hosting this year, just encouraging you to use what you got, be it patterns in your library, yarn in your stash, books on your shelves. This is your push to just use those things first. With those things out of the way, I'll tell you quick what I'm wearing today, which is admittedly, I don't know, I was bored, so I had to wear something a little bit more festive. I also just got this shirt and I'm particularly excited about it. It says pig and it's a pig, and I just really like that, but I thought it looked really cute paired underneath my cozy sand cardigan by Maria Iseva Ulan Knitwear. I knit up this cardigan for the longest time out of Nora, Madara, and the colorway 01 Sake, and it is finally the time of year where I can actually wear this the way that I had intended when I cast it on, which is those very chilly mornings that inevitably turn into warm summer-like days. But as a bridal hairstylist, I am often up super early out the door before the sun is up, and it's just cold then. And then I usually have these long drives, and I just want something I can snuggle up in while I'm on my way to work. So this is exactly the perfect thing for that. And I'm really excited to finally have it on today. So with those things out of the way, I think we should go ahead and dive on in. Let's go ahead and start with a project that I'm pretty surprised to actually call a finished object today. Pretty much. I'm calling it a finished object. It will be done in the next day, so I'm done. I'm ready to call it quits on this one, and that is my Dachshund by Alan Dart, the little sausage dog that I've been knitting up for my friend. It has been an absolute labor of love. I had no idea when I cast this little puppy on that it was going to be more of a collectible figurine, put it on the shelf type thing, and less of a fun toy. So if that's what you're into, then I could definitely recommend the Ellen Dart patterns. However, if you're looking more just for something to gift to a newborn baby, I would maybe find something a little bit more simple. Regardless, our Dachshund is done. His name is Frankie, as I have knit him as a sort of replica of the baby's dog. So here is the basically finished Mr. Frankie. I am going to be so sad to let this little guy go. I mean, he's darling, is he not? So I knit little Frankie out of Wool and the Gang Buddy Hemp in the colorway Trope Tan. And then his little nose was knit up out of some scrap Hobie seashell yarn in their black colorway. And then I have gone ahead and used the safety eyes. And then I just added, the only deviation from the pattern here is that after applying the safety eyes, I used some of the Buddy hemp to just kind of give him some eyelids, and it just softened the look of those little safety eyes. But he is done. This doggy was knit up by starting at the tail, I believe, and then increasing up towards the body in this long, kind of funny looking panel. Then you cast on the head in the weirdest looking panels. All of these little paws had to be knit individually, and they were all seamed up to actually make them three-dimensional. So to begin with, it just looked like an absolute mess, and it really did cause me to lose some steam while I was working on him. Then once I had all the pieces done, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to sit here and individually seam up every part of this and then stuff it and everything. And it just became, honestly, I bit off more than I could chew. But he is done. I finished seaming. The last time you guys would have seen him, all of his little legs were just kind of dangling, and now they're officially sewn on, and I think they're so precious, along with his little rat tail. So all this baby is missing right now is a collar, which I literally just cast this on before filming. So I stopped looking at the pattern. Once it came to seaming this thing together, I couldn't look at the pattern anymore because it was really just a matter of molding and shaping and seaming these things until they looked right. And I figured for the collar, all I should just do is I cast on 8 stitches with an Italian cast on, and I've just started double knitting. So knit one, slip one with the yarn in front, working that back and forth until it's long enough to go around his sweet little neck. And then once it is, I'm going to seam it together. I'll probably tack it on just so that the baby can't pull it on and off. And then I might go back and add like a little emblem or something with the dog's name on it, or I might not, because I was even going to do more details than I've done on this, and I started to do them. To be honest, I actually did do some of the detail work. So I had been saving various scrap yarns that I thought would be nice colors to just add some kind of like highlights and shadows to little Frankie's face. And I started to do it, and it just seemed like it wasn't giving the look that I was hoping it would give. And for the amount of work it was going to take additionally to just add all those details, I said, they know who this is. Like, it looks like their dog. They're going to know exactly who it's supposed to look like. I stalked her Instagram page to see what color collar or harness he wears, and it's red. So that's why I cast on a red collar out of some thrifted yarn that's been kicking around. And that'll be that. He's done. I think I will give him a quick steam. I'll finish this collar and I'll get this over to her and all will be good. And honestly, he's just so darling. He doesn't need anything else. I love him so much. And I think baby is going to love just kind of like tugging on his little ears and stuff. And he's super secure. She already knows the drill with the safety eyes, so we don't have to worry about that. But I'm glad to have this one done. Let me go ahead and give you the finished object stats officially, and then we're going to have to say bye to Mr. Frankie, and it's going to be a sad day because I have grown to love him. I will say one thing about this pattern is if you choose to knit this, good luck to you, first of all. Second of all, if I'm honest, I would just knit up 4 of these little front legs. This situation was so wildly unnecessary, and I think it makes there's just, even in the original pattern, I can't figure out what the heck this is really supposed to be looking like. Anytime you look at a Dachshund, you just see these 4 little stumpy legs. So if you want to knit up this pattern, make it easy on yourself and just knit up 4 little front legs and pop those onto the front and back. Because as it is, there's simply no world in which he can actually stand on these things. And had I placed them up any higher or forward like the pattern suggested, I just thought it looked kind of strange, to be honest. So they're good enough as they are. He just is always in a state of like sitting, and that's gonna have to be okay. So that's my advice if you want to knit this pattern. Anyway, let me give you the finished object stats. So the pattern is Dachsund by Alan Dart, and it costs $4.93. I will say that I did have to purchase this one specifically from his website, so that is where that price came from. It was not in my library. And the yarn I used, like I said, that's Wool and the Gang Buddy Hemp in that colorway Trope Tan. That was some stash yarn, so I could enter hashtag 2025 from the vault with this project. And this is honestly shocking. I don't know that I even realized these numbers before I started, but apparently that yarn is not cheap. The original price of the Wool and the Gang Buddy Hemp is $19.50 per ball. I found the 2 balls of it at the thrift store for $1 a piece, which means that because I did tap into 2 balls, I used about 1.5 balls to make the whole Frankie. Had I purchased the yarn at full price to knit this project, my yarn expense total would have been $39. However, because it was thrifted, it cost me $2. The additional expenses here are the cotton stuffing. I stuffed both Frankie and his companion Marvin using the same bag of stuffing. I have quite a bit of this left, but I had just purchased this on Amazon. It's an organic, natural organic cotton stuffing. And I think I've been just counting this as quarters. Honestly, I just copied the same total from Marvin. So I'm saying that I used about $5 worth of eyes and cotton, as I also bought the safety eyes in a multi-pack. So there's plenty more eyes to go around. So $5 in additional expenses, which means that the full price project total, so that's the yarn, the pattern, plus additional expenses at full price. Frankie, I want you to hear this firsthand. You are valued at a whopping $48.93. That's this guy's total value. However, we only spent $11.93 on you, and that's a lot easier to stomach. That was all 4 projects that wound up being on my needles. I've never given you guys the actual days on needles for this project, and so I had to go back and figure out when I cast it on, because when I cast on, I really thought it was going to be like a week and it was done, so I never even wrote it down. This took a total of 93 days, and that's assuming I finished that collar today, which I'm gonna. So that also means that the cost per day to knit our friend Frankie was only 13 cents, and I'll take that for a gift knit. So that's what I have for you on Mr. Frankie here. I'll try to snap a few pictures of the red collar once it's done and on our Frankie. And if I can, I'll even see if I could get a photo of Frankie with Frankie once I'm able to get this over to my friend. We'll have to coordinate when we can meet up. But that is our finished object this week. Yay! Frankie's done. All right, you guys, on to the next one. Let me just go ahead and say it right now. Stitches sweater was not worked on. Camisole number 7. I did not knit those rows during coffee in the mornings. It's been a crazy week, and mindful knitting was not on the docket. I do have a little story update about the stitches sweater later, so I can tell you that then, but let's just remove those from our mind and get to the project that is also just about finished. It will be finished next week, so we could just kind of update you on this today. That's going to be my Darling Cardigan by Veronica Lindberg, Kutova Kika. This is a drop shoulder v-neck cardigan that I've been knitting out of K&C Cloud Alpaca yarn. It's a blown yarn. It's a nylon tube blown with baby alpaca and superwash merino fibers in this cotton candy pink color. I will pop her onto Helena for you. here she is, and feel free to yell at me in the comments because no, I didn't block it before knitting the button band. I did, however, try this on a few more times and just kind of tugging on it and creating this effect of like if it were blocked, I did feel more comfortable about the length that it was at, and I felt confident enough that this would block out to the length I'd want it to be that I said, let me just go ahead and knit the button band. So that's what I did. This was knit using a double knit button band, and the buttonholes, there's just 3 of them worked on this side. Now, the pattern includes a tutorial for the Darling Cardigan double knit button band. I did start out by following that tutorial just to see how she was going to have me do the buttonholes, but I forgot that this is one of those cardigans that the buttonholes were worked using the method where you cut the yarn and then work the rows and then reattach yarn, and so there's a lot of ends to weave in. I did do the first button that way, and then the second button I was actually just kind of trying to see if I could recall how to do a buttonhole without breaking the yarn. And I know I didn't do it quite right, but it gets the job done. What I wound up doing is I knit up to the point where the buttonhole stitch marker was. So I marked out those locations first. And then once I actually hit that location, I worked the first half of stitches for the amount of rows she had you do at the first buttonhole, which I think in this case was about 8 rows tall. So I worked those 8 rows just on the second half of stitches. And then I just did a yarn over and worked and shifted over to just working the first set of stitches back and forth for those 8 rows. It actually wound up being 9 rows because you had to finish on a right side row so that I could work a whole wrong side row going back. However, once I was at that point, I had the yarn over in the middle and I knit that together with the stitch next to it to just sort of join it across the row. I think that was how it was done, something along those lines when I had done the Manon cardigan, and that used the don't cut your yarn buttonhole style. I'm not 100% sure though, and what I wound up with was just a strand of yarn that's about as tall as the buttonhole. That was the yarn over, I guess. And so that's kind of just floating behind the buttonhole. Not the end of the world. No one's ever going to see it. And after a while, it's just going to kind of get buried behind the buttons anyway, as I mostly am going to be wearing this as a blouse. So that was what I had done. It's a pretty narrow button band, which I do maybe wish that I had checked my buttons next to that before I had done the whole thing. Because in my head it was wider and it's just not, but it's very sleek and finished, and I really do love the look of that. This cardigan was knit from the top down. It has the 2x1 ribbing, so 2 knit stitches, 1 purl. All of the edges are finished with a rook bind off, and then the drop shoulder, you pick up the stitches. I picked up as many stitches as I had to at a rate of 2 out of 3 stitches because Veronica Lindbergh must have some skinny arms, as that's just always the case with her patterns for me and a lot of other people. I always have to pick up more stitches for the sleeves. And then you literally just work 3 decreases. So it's like a barely tapered sleeve, more of that same ribbing and the rook bind off. And I did bring my button down, so let me show you what that's gonna look like. I thought I had misplaced my button for a second there. So I am planning to just use these shell buttons on the button band. They are, like I said, just a little bit bigger than I probably would have planned, or vice versa. I would have, had I checked it against the button band before doing the button band, I would have added just probably 2 stitches to the button band itself. Just because they are, like I said, about as wide as the button band is. I don't think it's the end of the world. I think that they're going to look super cute on there anyway. And being that I will mostly be wearing this closed, I'll probably just cheat them over ever so slightly so that I can get just a little bit more closure, And that's kind of what it's gonna look like. I think those are gonna look really pretty on there. I might browse through my other buttons and see if there's something else that's better suited, but that's kind of the plan for now. And so all I have left to do here is block this guy. You should be seeing some before blocking shots today. I thought this would be another one that would just be so fun to wear with my pig shirt. So yeah, very stoked about that. And my plan is also to wear this to my sister's baby shower when we get to that in November. So I'm glad that I got this done in time. Just got to block and add buttons, and I'll be wearing it in the next podcast episode. As of today, it has been a project for 35 days total. So also a super, super quick knit, chunky needles, easy peasy, good little palette cleanser. So that is my darling cardigan. We'll keep Helena around for a second because I do have one more whip that I can show you on the hanger. So this was my new cast on. I asked in the last podcast episode which pattern you guys would prefer to see me knit next. And I was choosing from the Miles shirt jacket, the Nomad jacket from Wool and Beyond, and the Chantilly cardigan. I think that those were the three options that I had given you. And ultimately, it really boiled down to the Miles shirt jacket or the Nomad jacket. And I just paused and looked at the whips I have going right now, some things I'm planning to cast on, and chose from there to indeed cast on the Miles shirt jacket by Ozetta. This pattern has been on my wish list since literally 2 years ago. I think in my very first fall winter knitting plans video, I discussed wanting to knit this pattern. I bought the yarn for it last year and it just hasn't happened yet. So now is the time. It's the perfect fall layering piece. I do find that there's a void in my handmade wardrobe as far as really practical knits. So things that I can just kind of leave by the door to chuck on when we're going to go take OC for a walk or something. And this pattern seems like the perfect thing to do just that. So let me get around to Helena. I'll tell you where we're at with things. Here she is. It's looking very like Shrek core right now, and you wouldn't be wrong to think that. So clearly I have gotten a lot done on this project. That is in part due to the fact that this is being knit up on 6mm needles. It's actually intended, I believe, to be on 5.5mm needles, and my gauge was best suited to the 6mm, so that was what I used. Now, the yarn I'm using for this project, oh no, it broke. The yarn that I'm using for this project did indeed break. I guess as I just put it up here, I have to remember how fragile this yarn is. It's my first time working with these plates of unspun yarn. So the one that I am working with is Istex Plotulopi, whereas the pattern calls for Wool Dreamers Manchalopi. Now, I had some confusion in figuring this out, so allow me to be the guinea pig here, but it is my understanding that the Wool Dreamers Manchalopi comes on a plate, and it is basically 2 strands running together throughout the plate of yarn. The Istex Plotulopi is a single strand on a plate. So funny kind of thing that happened here. I think when I originally ordered the yarn for this project, I was confused or forgot that was the case, that the Manchalopi has the 2 strands, Istex has the Plotulopi has the 1 strand. The Miles shirt jacket is knit up with 2 strands of Manchalopi. So I had gone ahead and ordered enough plates of yarn to knit this up with a single strand, not realizing that I would need to hold 2 strands together. And so when I made that realization back when I had knit the swatch, I found the yarn on sale. I ordered some more, but now I'm kind of thinking that I did originally order the appropriate. I don't know what I did, guys. The moral of the story is I think I'm going to have a ton of this stuff left over. So this might actually be the first time that I wind up just selling a sweater's quantity of yarn. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Maybe I love the feeling of this so much I decide to make something else out of this yarn, although that might be shocking to me because it is rustic. That's no surprise to anyone who's familiar with this stuff, but holy cow, I have received some suggestions to maybe use some conditioner when I block it and just kind of let it soak to soften up the fibers. I'm not particularly sensitive, and I find this to just be like, it's fine next to my skin. It doesn't bother me so much, but it is, I think, an example of one of those things where in the plate, these are called, I find it to be a little softer than it is in the knit fabric. Not sure why that would be the case, but it's my experience as of right now. So we'll see how that goes. So this unspun yarn, it's really, really fragile, which I've heard so many people talk about, but this has been kind of a learning curve to work with. And I can't tell you how many times I've done what I just did now, which was to pick up the project and move it away from the ball of yarn, and the yarn just broke on its own. It breaks super, super easily. But the good news is it also splices back together very easily. So with literally just a little pull, you pull the yarn apart. However, anytime that's happened, I've had no issue just kind of spit splicing them back together and rubbing them together, and it's worked out just fine. So that means little ends to weave in here. As I'm sitting here, I think you could tell too, this color is like the exact same color as my hair. That's very funny to me. But where we're at as of right now is you do start by casting on the back in that typical drop shoulder trapezoid shape so that you're increasing down the back, which in turn is giving you this really pretty just kind of shoulder detail, I guess. So that's just kind of done by where you're increasing versus where the edge of your work is. And then once you reach the depth of the armhole, you pick up the stitches for the front and work your way down there until it all reaches under the arm. And now we are working flat back and forth as a cardigan would be typically. Now, one thing to note here is that I've had some kind of funny puckering where all of those increases are worked, and that's just very typical for me. Anytime I have a drop shoulder sweater where you're increasing every row, I have such a hard time making that really neat and tidy, and I don't know if there's a secret or if it's just the case when you're knitting and cramming so many stitches into such little space. If you have a tip, I'd love to hear it. But that's just kind of what's going on right now. I'm hoping that that puckering that you could probably see right in here, it's just kind of bubbling. I'm hoping that that fixes itself in blocking. So where I am right now, you can see I have worked just a few inches under the arms, and yeah, I've just been working back and forth on this guy, and it really has become my mindless knitting since I can just knit and purl back and forth without looking at my work. It's been a joy to have on the needles. That being said, this is a shirt jacket, or I would call it a shacket, versus a cardigan. So the idea for this one, for me at least, is to be able to chuck this on over top of like a sweatshirt, a hoodie or something, to be able to wear it maybe if I'm wearing leggings and a sweatshirt or something, to be able to really wear it as a jacket style. So I'm definitely going to be knitting this one on the longer side as compared to a lot of my other cardigans. Compared to the Darling cardigan, this is going to be like a full dress. But one of my favorite details about this sweater is the curved hem that it has. So it's a little bit shorter on the sides, on the hips, and then it dips down in the back and the front. So you get a little extra booty coverage, but you don't totally lose that shape because of the scoop up on the sides of the hem. Another fun detail on this shacket are the large pockets on the front, which, okay, I was just about to say, I don't think I've ever knit something with pockets, but the cardigan I'm currently wearing does have pockets. They're kind of in the side seams, but this will be right on the front of the cardigan, which again, just makes it more functional and a little bit more fun. And then once the sleeves are done, the whole thing is just finished off with this ribbing button band and then the ribbed collar. That's really where we're going to find out how well I can withstand the feeling of this knit fabric next to my neck and stuff. I'm not sure yet what we're going to be doing about the knit collar. I feel like at this point, I'm either going to have to just knit it very short so that it's not like resting on my neck, or I'll probably wind up just knitting it a little bit longer so that I could just fold it back and kind of keep it off of my neck. So we'll see how that pans out when we get there. So I think that's everything as far as where we're at with the Miles shirt jacket right now. I know a few of you were saying that you were planning to knit this one as well. So if you are, I'd love to hear about it. Let me know that you're knitting it down in the comments. I'll tell you that as of right now, it's been really simple, quick, and satisfying. And the pattern itself, this is my first time knitting one of Ozetta's patterns, and she does something in her pattern writing that I just think is the best, which is with pretty much every step, every instruction, she does tell you not only how many rows you should be working, but when you're done with those rows, how far along you should be. So she gives you the rows and the inch measurement, which in this particular case is very helpful for me because my stitch gauge is on, but my row gauge is like whack. It is nowhere near what it's supposed to be. And I was a little bit nervous about how I would then modify things and know when to change things because according to my row gauge, I would be literally like for every 4 inches, I would be an entire inch off. So that would really add up over time. And because she has the measurements listed, I have just been able to account for that rather than the rows listed when those things matter. So it's mostly the armhole depth and everything. I've accepted that in certain circumstances, like the increasing on the back, I really can't change that. Maybe that's why I'm getting the puckering. The one place that I did kind of take matters into my own hands was in the increasing for the neckline. Had I just gone ahead doing the increases at the rate I was supposed to in the pattern, I wouldn't have finished increasing until like down here. So I just compacted like the last 4 rows of that so that I get a little bit less depth in the neckline, while also assuming it wouldn't be the end of the world if my neckline sat a little lower. So I'm just kind of playing it by ear, doing what I can to make sure I get a really beautiful finished object here. And if you saw those fall knitting plans, I thought that this could be a fun option to have for that Rhinebeck weekend, whatever that turns into for me. So that is the Miles shirt jacket, finally on my needles. And as of today, I have been knitting on this guy for 8 days total. So very, very fast knit. To wrap things up today, I do just want to touch base very quickly on my stitches sweater. This has obviously been such a saga. It turned into something more than I ever really expected it to. But over the weekend, I went a second round of wedding dress shopping. That's like a whole other topic of conversation. But a couple of my aunts had joined me, one who knits, one who crochets. They both dabble in the other, but they were with me for this dress shopping experience. And so I brought the stitches sweater because I really needed to get someone else's hands on this to help me figure out what was going to be the best approach. And I'm at this point right now where I'm feeling like, okay, this has been sitting for a few weeks. I need to just make some decisions, be them right or wrong decisions. They just need to be made. We need to commit. And another kind of Rhinebeck weekend contender, if this is done by then, I'd love to just wear it that weekend. And I think that would be a really great kind of finishing point to say, let's get this done. And we have what, a month? A little more than a month right now. So that feels very doable. They felt this and they were like, oh my gosh, it's even more dense and thick than they had really expected. But also we were kind of passing it around and we really do feel like with some wear and with like just moving and everything, the material is softening up so much. So I feel like I need to spend an hour just kind of mushing this and softening up the fibers and everything. And then I think the only thing that's really going to get me motivated on working on this is to just cut it. Like I just need to bust out the scissors and I'm going to cut this and then figure out what's happening next rather than coming up with a whole game plan. I think I've been overthinking things. Clearly I have been because nothing's happened and I've done a lot more talking than I have been knitting on this project. So I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to do whatever feels right in the moment and say it's clearly not going to be my new everyday sweater. And so why not just have fun? Okay? We're having fun. The one thing we know for sure, just to recap, is the collar is going to be, I have the yarn, I can show you. So the collar will be knit out of the Knit Picks palette in the colorway Finley Heather. It most closely resembles the body color, and that's what's going to be the double folded ribbed collar. To line that, I think I'm going to do a double knitting pop of color for the button placket. That's going to be in this Knit Picks palette lady slipper, which calls upon the color work at the top here. So love that. That's what's for sure happening on the top of this sweater. The next thing that I'm going to just do is I'm going to cut out a bunch of the fabric from the back. So I'm going to cut basically these like isosceles triangles from the sides of this garment. And I almost picture it kind of looking like my yoga winter sweater by Naringa Rook, which tapers in this like upside down trapezoid situation. That's kind of what I'm imagining these cutouts looking like. But then I will be finishing those off also with the double knit edge and adding grommets to that and adding a like corseted lace up feature so that I'll have no problem getting this thing over my head and then lacing up the sides for a little extra personality and pizzazz. Then the hem will be finished like the collar will be with more of that double layer of ribbing that's going to be folded under. I'm going to do it in a way that hides all of these funky blanket stitch edges that I did just to seal off the edge here. And then the last remaining thing is going to be the sleeves, which I'm going to cut them and then see what I want to do from there. I'm going to make a game time decision and just stick with it. But that's really the greatest concern. I feel good about everything else. It's just the sleeves being a little too tight that I'm worried about. But the point is that everything that's going to be felted is felted. It's done. Anything that's going to be knit, I have to do still, and it's going to be out of one of these two yarns. So I think that now I just need to bust out the scissors and one thing at a time. So the first thing will be the collar, which you guys know I already started and I've just stalled out on, but I'm into it now. I have a deadline. I will try and get this done for that Rhinebeck weekend so that hopefully I can share it with any of you who I might run into along that weekend's journey, whatever it's going to be. I don't know my plans yet for the weekend, so I'm being so like obscure about it. But yeah, my aunts got their hands on this. Also, a little bit of a funny story time. So I did go for my second round of wedding dress shopping, and they accompanied me. I can tell you guys more plans about my wedding dress and all of that. If you're interested, just let me know. Maybe we're due for a Q&A sometime soon. But we kind of had an interesting experience. I actually, the place that we had gone to, an Anthropologie bridal store to try on some dresses. And I thought it was really funny that the dress attendant who was, our shopper, I don't know what she's called, our bridal dress attendant, she made a comment that I've never noticed about myself, but feels true, that I must have a very short torso, she told me. The reason was because a lot of these wedding dresses were just fitting, like the waist wasn't hitting me in quite the right spot, and then the straps would wind up being too long. So she said, "I think you have a very short torso." And I was like, "Oh, I've literally never noticed that before, but okay, not something I've ever thought of." And then after that point, she kind of like ran with this idea because I said, "Sounds good. I guess now I have a short torso." And then she kind of kept referring to me as like, "Well, as a short torso person, because of your short torso, none of these dresses are going to fit you right because, you do have a very short torso." And it kind of became like now I'm self-conscious about my short torso. I do think it reminded me a little bit of how important it is to discuss people in a positive affirmation type way, rather than a negative way. And this is something that I encounter all of the time as a bridal hairstylist. I feel like I'm constantly, I wouldn't just say, "Oh my gosh, your hair is so thin." That's not something I would ever tell a bride, but you would focus on you might not have quite as much hair as the girl in the photo. So I'm not sure that we can exactly achieve that look without something like extensions or, hair forms to achieve that. Or if someone's asking about hair around their face or something, I wouldn't say, "Girl, your double chin is really noticeable because of that hair wrapping around it." I would instead say something like, "Oh, well, I think that the thing that's going to draw the eye up the most and bring the attention to your beautiful cheekbones and your eyes is going to be to have that hair framing and highlighting more of this area rather than coming and closing in around our face." Those are some things that I would say, and I thought that it was just funny that this dress attendant, I might say if I were in her shoes, something along the lines of, "Well, because, your proportions are you have these long legs, it's very possible that the waist just isn't hitting you quite right." Or like we could just blame the dress, right? We could just say, "Well, I think that this dress is just made for someone who's a really different body type than you." No problem. But instead, like anytime I didn't like the way a dress was fitting, she's like, "Well, it's probably because of your short torso." So now anytime I'm knitting something, I'm going to be very aware of the fact that I have the shortest torso that the people at Anthropology have ever seen. Anyway, as people who are constantly looking at things and the way that they go onto our bodies or other people's bodies, I just thought that that was a really healthy reminder that you don't need to focus on the negative. You can totally reframe everything. It's never your body that's the problem. It is 100% the garment. And the really cool thing about being able to make your own clothes is that you have the ability to address your super short torso and just make sweaters that fit you the way that you want them to. I could laugh about it. I think it's kind of funny. I feel as though I wish maybe I had said to her, I don't know, I wasn't going to like confront this woman. She was just doing her job. I just thought it was funny that once I kind of was like, "Oh, yeah, that sounds like it could be the case." She was like, "All right, short torso girl, let's go try on another dress." And it was just funny to me. Your body's not the problem. The garment is, and you know how to make clothes, which also means that you know how to make them fit your body or whoever's body you're putting them on just the right way. And just be careful about the way you talk about people because you don't know what they're thinking and what's going through their head. That is my loving advice this week, for some reason with the Stitches sweater here. Anyway, this was a fun little brief update. I think I'm going to bring Frankie back to close out this video. So to recap, I'm going to be done with the Darling cardigan. I am done with Mr. Frankie. So looking at my notes here, I am going to be working on the Miles shirt jacket. I have to finish that camisole number 7. I really do want to get that done. And then the other top of mind project is the Stitches sweater, which the goal is going to be to get that done for Rhinebeck. If you've seen my fall knitting plans and you have a suggestion of what you think I should cast on next from that, I'd love to know down below. I think it should be something fairly mindless, since that camisole number 7 is a little more involved, and so is the Stitches sweater project and just everything else? Or do I just keep my head down and keep working on what I have until I finish one of those 3 things? That's probably the best advice. Before I totally close out this video, I thought that I should just make a quick mention of it, that this week has marked the 2nd anniversary of my starting this channel. I genuinely cannot believe that I've been doing this every week, just about, for the past 2 years. I posted my first video on this channel on September 9th of 2023. So I just want to say the biggest thank you to everyone who's been watching since then. To those of you who have been here since the beginning, absolutely, I'm so appreciative, and I'm genuinely grateful to have you here and to spend time with you every week. To the new viewers, thank you for joining the party. I started this channel with a mission, and that was, do I need to be doing this with this dog? I started this channel with a mission, and that was to show beginner knitters that you don't have to start with a scarf, and you don't have to start with a hat, and you don't only have to work stockinette. You can do anything once you know how to knit and purl. And so if garment knitting is what you want to do, then I 100% believe you can. I don't think it's as difficult as people make it out to be. And I don't think that there's a threshold to when you are allowed to start knitting more complicated projects. They're all knits and purls and little variations of those things. And I promise you that if you want to knit the hard things, you can. And especially if you remember the fact that the imperfections are what makes something so perfectly handmade. Every little mistake is just a signature that you made it. And if you remember back when I made my messy dressy last year, I was sitting behind a little girl who turned around to tell me that she loved my dress. And I said, thanks, I made it. And that blew her away. And then she asked me, did you make any mistakes? And I was so proud to show her every little missed stitch, wrong color, funny looking thing, and say, yeah, like, look, I messed up here and I messed up here. And yet when you look at it as a whole, you'll never see those things. But now that little girl and I both know that it was indeed made with my 2 hands. And so if she didn't believe me, the proof was in those little flaws. And ultimately, it's just the most beautiful part of making something with your own 2 hands. So thank you for being along for the journey. Thanks for giving me somewhere where I get to be myself, say things like buttons and cotton, and honestly learn from you, because 90% of the time on this channel, I am asking for your help, your advice. I love the collaborative effort that we have here, and I genuinely feel so connected to those of you who show up every week. I can't thank you enough. I know I'm rambling, but it has to be said that I'm grateful beyond words. And I just find a lot of joy in talking to myself, talking to you. And thanks for giving me a space to do that. Yeah, honestly, thank you. 2 years is a long time, and I get emotional when I think about the fact that before this channel, I was just a girl in her living room knitting, and now I'm still just a girl talking to a camera, but you're out there, and that's pretty darn cool. So, with all that, if you enjoyed this video, I'd love it if you'd give it a thumbs up. And if you want to join the party and subscribe, go ahead and click that button. And don't forget to make sure that the bell is rung so that you're notified anytime I post a new video. However, you can usually expect a Saturday morning upload at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. With that, a big ol' Yeah, just big ol' thanks for watching. I will catch you on the next one. All right, guys. Bye.